how would you characterize General Doolittle?
He's one of the nicest and best militarily informed, educated sort of persons that you'd ever want to meet. He's a straight shooter, and he led by example. And particularly the development of the teamwork, being a team member. Even though he was the team chief, he was a team member. He treated everybody the same.
Do you recall the ceremony when they tied the medals onto the bombs to give them back?
Mm-hmm.
Were you present for that? Can you just describe it?
Mm-hmm. Well, they had the bombs that we were going to use, the high explosive bombs, and Eureka had gotten some medals from the Japanese when he was at in the embassy or a mission or whatever in Japan. And he gave them to Colonel Doolittle, and we tied him to the tail of the bomb.
Good riddance.
Well, it's kind of payback time.
Right.
Colonel Cole, what was your initial reaction when they told you you were going to be flying B-25s off a carrier deck?
We had practiced with same load and so forth on our own, and with a 10-knot wind, and in addition, on the Hornet was on its maiden voyage, or shakedown voyage. They had placed two B-25s on the carrier and taken off, so we knew it was feasible. So, if they can do it, we can do it.
What was the actual launch like to take off from the rolling carrier deck?
It was, well, early on everybody thought it would be the most difficult thing, but it turned out to be one of the easiest things. We had plenty of wind, and the weather helped out with the natural wind, and the fact that the ship was moving up and down or around made no difference. There wasn't a problem.
What was the most difficult part of the mission then?
Standing in an airplane with the hatch open at 9,000 feet in the middle of a big thunderstorm and so forth, trying to make the decision of jumping out or not. So that was the most scary time.
What were your thoughts when the decision was made to launch early after detection of the fleet?
Get to the airplane first. That's the name of the game is a co-pilot. And get there before the pilot. Otherwise, you get in a one-way conversation.
How was Colonel Doolittle during the flight? Could you tell, was he nervous at all, or just business as usual?
No, he was very naturally determined. We had no chit-chat or anything like that. Everything was business.
Do you remember what your first thoughts or feelings were when you saw the Japanese coast?
Yeah, very nice looking. Lots of greenery, and well organized and so forth. And a nice beach, just like flying over Florida.
Colonel, can you talk about how dejected then Colonel Doolittle was after you guys bailed out over China? That famous picture of him sitting by the wing, he looked like he thought that you guys had failed.
I can only do it by hearsay from Paul Leonard, the crew chief that went to the airplane where the airplane crashed.
Right.
He related it to me and to the rest of the crew. But, he was very dejected, and that was when Paul told him that he said he might end up in Leavenworth. And Paul told him, no, you're going to be promoted and get the Congressional Medal of Honor. And if you ever have another airplane, I'm going to be your crew chief.
What do you think the Doolittle Raiders' legacy will be, or how do you think they prefer including yourself to be remembered?
Well, I hope but remember we were just a member of the whole big force that finally got rid of the Axis, the bad people. We did it by everybody doing something.
Now, do you have any particular thoughts on the ceremonies today, or the fact that the Air Force Museum is hosting several days worth of events to honor you and your fellow flyers?
Great to see that many airplanes in the air and B-25s in the air.
Did you ever think back in 1942 that something like this would eventually come to pass?
We thought that just another bombing mission. Figured people would forget about it by now. I was in North Africa then all of 1943 in B-26s. You know what they are?
Yeah, Marauders.
They've got one here at the museum. Yeah. It killed a lot of guys in training. Maybe you heard that we were training at the MacDill Field, Tampa, Florida, in summer of '42, and they singing down there with one a day in Tampa Bay. Well, they didn't lose that many, but they lost a lot of them, and usually it was fatal to the whole crew when they tried. Once we got into combat, the B-26 held up real good. Took a beating, yeah.
Which would you prefer, though, the B-25 or the B-26?
Probably B-25. It was more maneuverable and much easier to fly because the B-26 is a hot airplane, and that's why they needed experienced pilots to fly out what they got. Yeah.
Now, on the Tokyo mission, you were the flight engineer?
Yeah, I was in a machine gun turret on top.
The top turret?
Yeah, the only turret we had, yeah.
Did you actually see any Japanese aircraft over Japan?
Yeah, after we left the coast, there was a formation of 6 enemy planes came toward us, but it's very difficult to see an airplane flying right over the ground. But they didn't see us; they just kept on going, and we didn't see any more aircraft. Just any aircraft fire over Tokyo, but it was pretty thick, but it wasn't accurate at all. They hadn't had any experience yet.
Now, when you took off, what were your reactions when you knew that you were launching, hours and hundreds of miles early, and it would most likely be a one-way flight?
Didn't think much about it. We figured we'd get there right. I had confidence we'd get there, China.
Were there any provisions for defending the aircraft? You were originally supposed to land at a Chinese airbase. Was there any concern about Japanese ground troops and defending the aircraft when you refueled?
Well, they thought that maybe it would have been captured by that time, the aircraft. But we were supposed to originally take off in the evening and bomb Japan at night and reach China the next morning. But spotting that patrol boat out there, that changed our plans. And they did radio to Japan. There was an enemy task force out there, but the Japanese knew that there was no carrier airplane in the U.S. could reach that far, so they weren't worried about it.
They never planned on Jimmy Doolittle?
No. They planned ahead of time if we run into a task force. If we're within flying distance of Hawaii, we're supposed to take off immediately and fly there, or if we're within distance of Guam, and if we weren't within distance of those two places, or Japan was to have to push the airplanes overboard so the Hornet airplanes could get in the air. They couldn't take off or land while we were on deck.
Any particular recollections of the startup and actually watching the other planes that were in front of you go down the deck?
Well, we could see them real good, but we knew they were going to they all got off all right, so we weren't worried about anything.
No concerns about whether anybody
No,
before you would be able to get off all right.
no.
Dave, I have a question for you. Once you were up in the air, and you, like everybody else, none of you had enough gasoline to get, at first you thought you weren't going to get to the moon. Did you have plans for what you were going to do if you didn't get that far?
No plans at all. We expected to get to China.
You did.
I'm almost afraid to ask, have you seen the more recent film Pearl Harbor and its depiction of the Doolittle Raid?
That was a lousy movie. Nothing accurate at all in that thing. Our historian read the script for it before they ever made it, and he tried to get them to correct a lot of stuff in there, but they nothing new, and they wouldn't take his advice at all.
When you were first starting the Doolittle mission, did you know what it was going to be, or did you volunteer for it, or how did you get into it?
Well, that was very early in the war, and I was with an outfit stationed out in the Pacific Northwest when the war first started, the first few months. And they said there was a mission being planned and trained, where the people were being trained and led by Jimmy Doolittle for a secret mission on the East Coast. And I went over there and got in with that gang, and actually Doolittle picked another fellow and me to go up to Washington, D.C. and work with Air Force intelligence to put together a lot of the information we had to have to supply 16 planes with good targets to hit in the Japanese islands. So I spent about 10 days up there, got all that information, went back down, and then as we went across the Pacific, we would have a meeting every day, and each crew was assigned a specific target in the Japanese islands. And as it turned out, the weather didn't work in our favor too much. We got about 600 miles from Japan. We had wanted to get about 250 or 300, and we had to take off. They spotted us out there, and we had to take off and bomb from way out there. And at that time, when we took off for the mission against Japan, our calculations told us we would never get any closer to the Chinese coast than about 250 or 300 miles. We were going to have to ditch. But we got a tremendous break in the weather when we got south of Japan that day after we bombed Japan. And we got a strong westerly wind which blew us into the China coast. 3 of our planes actually got 300 miles inland. The rest either ditched along the coast, or 2 or 3 of them were shot down by the Japanese.
Did you think you were not going to make it back? I mean, particularly when you had to launch so early.
Well, you don't know. You don't worry about that. You worry about figuring a way to get out of that. Of course, when we were out there, we didn't at first think we had enough gas. We were simply going to ditch next to the first ship we saw, and they'd take us aboard. Friendly ship, we'd sail off with them. Unfriendly, we all had 45s, we'd take it over. Those were the best plans we could make then, until we found out we got the tremendous break in the weather.
What do you see as the legacy of the Raiders? What 100 years from now, what will people say about what you guys did?
Well, America were lulled out of their sleep and realized that it was a very dangerous world, and they better train some fighting forces to fight on their side. And we were just happened to be some of the early birds that they trained to go out and start the thing up. And we got in some good licks against the enemy before they shot us down and took care of us. But in the meantime, we got men trained in other planes to do a better job.
What do you think about your other comrades who are here and who are departed? What are your thoughts about the other men here and the ones who are no longer around?
Well, what do we think of it? We miss them, of course. There's only about, you can see there 4 or 5 of us alive out of the 80 men that took part in that initial mission. And a lot of good men in there were shot down and captured in those early days. It was pretty rough going. But we overcame all that and won the blooming war after all.
I know the original mission was to land at a Chinese-controlled airbase to refuel and possibly rearm in order to fly to a U.S.-held airbase. But with that original mission parameters, what was the concerns of the Japanese Army actually, being occupying the airbase or attacking the airbase before you got off? What kind of precautions had you guys planned on?
We didn't know much about that area. Of course, we never got to get to the base to get our gas. We added extra miles onto our trip. That meant we didn't have enough gas to get where we wanted to go.
Did you carry small arms in order to defend the aircraft, or just pistols, or?
No, well, one of our crew had an automatic pistol. I didn't. We landed in the China Sea. Airplane done real well on the water landing. Bounced along the top of the waves and came to a rest. I worried it might take a nosedive in the water, but it didn't. And it stayed up for 10 minutes. And we got out of the airplane, got into the life raft, and everything was going pretty good. But then we pushed off the airplane, and the ailerons snagged a hold on our life raft, so we lost half our inflation. And two sections of it, lost inflation on one of them. So it no longer could be used as a life raft. There was a rope attached to it that I hung on to all the way to shore. Probably out there a half mile or so. It took quite a while, a couple hours. I think we pretty much came in on the tide. We couldn't swim or anything.
Now, you were a gunner on board the aircraft as well as an engineer, correct, or no?
I never was a gunner. Everybody wants to call me a gunner, but I was the crew chief and a flight engineer. I went everywhere with the airplane and done all the maintenance on it. We didn't have a gunner on the raid. Some people that write about it want to call me a gunner, but
that's one of the myths that gets perpetuated.
Yeah, I think maybe on some of the airplanes, the flight engineer might have spent some time in the turret. We never had a gunner. Kept them off, save weight. Of course, on the original plan, we didn't need them. We were supposed to be bombing in the dark in the middle of the night, But anyway, that's the way it was.
At what point did you know you were a part of something special? When did you know the significance of what you had done?
Well, all the significance. Well, after the war.
Well,
at the time, I didn't think that much about it. It was kind of a hard mission, but we got away with it, and that's that. After the war, then people got busy talking about it, and this is the result of all that. We were given a lot of credit. Right? We always knew that we helped the morale, but I never thought in terms of changing the war. When they say we changed the war, particularly in the Pacific, made it worthwhile.
If there's one thing you think the Doolittle Raiders and the raid should be known as, what would that be? If somebody doesn't know anything about it, what one thing would you want them to know?
We went and bombed Japan right after Pearl Harbor. That's a big thing right there. And of course we got away with it. The odds really went against us when they added that extra 200 or 300 miles to our trip. We didn't have gas for it. So I didn't expect to survive the mission when that happened. We'd be bombing low altitude in the middle of the afternoon and bright sunshine day. They could have shot us down with anything they had. But we surprised them, and they weren't ready. And that's one of the reasons that we survived.
they thought they couldn't be hit. They were taking their time talking about. They knew we were out there. They thought they knew every airplane that we had that would operate off a carrier. Had to get within 200 miles of Tokyo to be able to get back to the carrier. That's what they were thinking, of course. And they were way off base on that. So we had longer range airplanes. We weren't going back to carrier anyway. So they made the mistake of not panicking and getting something done. We had a little flak tail end of the mission. Don't think we ever got hit. We were sitting ducks. Should have got shot down, except they just weren't ready. For reasons of their own, I guess. Anyway, we got away with it. I guess didn't really know what to be scared of. You know, this is the first combat we'd ever been in. Haven't seen any war movies yet, so we didn't quite know what to be scared of. You know, we had no survival training. Could have used some survival training, but we had to dodge the Japanese army for a couple of weeks on the coast of China. They were wherever they wanted to be, and they knew we were there, and they were attacking us, and we had kind of a hard time getting away from them. That was kind of scary.
Now, at the time, did you realize that you were doing something special, or did it seem like just another job, just another mission?
A little special, but nothing like they say it was nowadays. Yeah, I knew we were doing a good thing by hitting them a little bit. Didn't expect all this. For spending the rest of the war in Europe, I've seen so much war over there that was so much more dangerous than what I did. Most guys, it was every day with the Army. Every day we were getting shot at. And we had just a couple of weeks or so, you know. So I didn't feel like that much of a hero after all those guys went through.